Good evening to everyone who's joining us online. I know there are many things happening, both virtually and in your physical spaces. I'd like to take this time and thank you for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it as the BMF. I do hope that you will gain a lot of insights from this conversation. I'd like to take this time to welcome the Minister, Ayanda Dlodlo, who's the Minister of State Security Agency. Just a little thing, when Philippe from the BMF office got an instruction to please invite the minister, he called me and was like, I just know it's you, Ivio, because you're always insisting on Minister Ayanda Dlodlo. Knowing that back in Cape Town as well, when the minister came to join the BMF, it was through my insistence. So I'm very happy to have this conversation with you, Minister. I'd like to also take this time to welcome our Deputy President, Ms. Tasnim Fredericks, in her absentia. She will be joining us a little later. She's just running an AGM in the Eastern Cape. Tasnim Fredericks is our Deputy President, and she's also the champion for Women Empowerment Desk within the BMF. I'd like to take this time to welcome my leader, Sis Mpho Museki, who's the Provincial Chairperson of the BMF. We also sit together on the BMF National Women Empowerment Desk. So thank you, Sis Mpho, for joining us tonight, and thank you to everyone at home for joining us tonight. We do not take your time for granted. Just a little formalities. We are only going to have about 3 speakers. We'll have Mpho opening with us. I'll have the chat with the minister, and then we'll have Tasnim Fredericks closing for tonight. And that's about it. I do encourage you to use the chat box as we're having this conversation. And if you have any questions and answers, there's a Q&A tab at the bottom. Please use that. I am no journalist, so this is not going to be a conversation where I am Q&Aing the minister. It's a conversation. I'm simply going to be an enabler of a conversation. So I'd like to get your views. I'd like you to ask the minister questions that are within with what we're discussing today. And also, please tag the BMF. So if you want to tweet this event, or if you want to Facebook, Instagram it, please tag the BMF. Their handles are at BMF National on all their social media pages. So yeah, without any further ado, let me just give context of why we're having this conversation. So many people are saying, you guys are having yet another conversation. And I think it is very imperative that the BMF continues to have conversations. BMF is a membership-led organization. It is an organization that is into advocacy and lobby. So conversations and dialogue remains crucial, because what the BMF says, it must be informed by the conversation that it has with its members. So when the presidency goes out and say positions on behalf of the BMF, it must be positions that resonate with what the membership of the BMF wants or is saying. So this is why we continue to have conversation in the BMF. And then why this fireside chat conversation, as the Women Empowerment Desk, we wanted to be deliberate about the conversations that we are having in the BMF. We wanted a space where we drop the facade and just, you know what, Minister, we know it's all serious and stuff, but tell us about this angle. What was the thinking behind this? So it is a safe space. It is a space where I want everyone to be free and to gain a lot from the minister. So we have carefully selected the people that we want to talk to on this fireside chat. And the fireside chat has 3 parts. Number 1, politics. Number 2, the political arena. It's going to be academia, and it's also going to be in business. And today we'll be going through the political arena, talking about rewriting the political playbook of this country. And to help us unpack that will be Minister Ayanda Dlodlo. So please stay with us and know that this is the conversation that we're having tonight. And we're also going to have a series of other of these conversations. Do join us on all those conversations that we'll be having. Let's chat on the chat box and please ask questions. So without any further ado, I'm going to start with Mpho Museki, who's the provincial chairperson of Gauteng and also on the BMF Empowerment Desk Committee, to welcome us tonight.
Thank you, Viwe. Minister Godlo, Deputy President of the BMF, Mr. Hasnim Frederick, BMF leaders on this webinar, BMF members, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and all protocol observed. Welcome to this webinar. 2020 has been a tough year. Many have lost loved ones, some members of the BMF. We have lost some members. And today we woke up to news that Mevuyo Mahlati, good friend of the BMF, has passed away. So please, may I ask you that we just take a moment to observe silence and in respect of those that have passed on. Thank you. So this topic is really critical, rewriting the political playbook. I'm not going to give a speech. I was tempted if you were, but I thought it's important to leave time for people who are in the know, who have spent time in politics, to just share with the members. It is really critical at this point in our democracy, and really at this point in the political climate of the world. I mean, we all know that, and many have observed with I'm sure with keen interest, what's happening in the United States, and how we had a woman candidate who has since dropped off the race. So it's really an important time for us to be discussing this topic. The topic is really relevant now. We have 6, when I searched, and you really have to search, and you come up with countries that some of us have not heard of. We have only 6 countries out of over 100 countries that have had women heads of state serving for more than one term. And one term I loosely take as 3 to 4 years. In South Africa, we are still waiting to have our first. So it's really important. And with D8, if you, I'm sure if all of you think you'll remember Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, and Angela Merkel in Germany. Those have been 2. We've had our in Africa. We've had Angela. Sirleaf in serving, but you have to go back, way back, and research deeply to really find women leaders in politics, especially at the top. So it's really, I'll keep reiterating, it's really critical. It's an important discussion to talk about where is this book that contains the other team strategies and plays. And when I say the other team, I'm talking about men, because it seems like there's a them and us in these discussions and with these roles. And how do we start to rewrite this playbook? How do we start to refine and change these strategies so that they start to favor us? It's not that there is lack of women leaders. It's just that perhaps we have not uncovered the secret strategies that we need to put into play. And Minister, we really look forward to hearing from you on how we can begin to do this with your experience in politics, and also with your experience in the private and in the private sector. I know you've worked at Sanlam, name a few. So we really need. We are looking forward to hearing how we can break this ceiling. The other day, the student chapter leaders asked me why it seems that women are only good enough to be vice or deputy. And I hope that you can begin to help me answer this question. It was really a tough one. I told them you should have given me this a week ago so I can research this question properly. Importantly, though, I think for us as the BMM, it's a BMF. I mean, if you mentioned, people are saying, why are we having conversation? It's for us as the BMF to translate these conversations into firm policy positions that we can advocate for. I'm calling on you as members to do just that. If you're not yet a member, to join us and be part of this journey of thought leadership and advocacy for socio-economic transformation. And that's really what I want to say. I'd like to end there. Anyway. Thank you, Minister. Welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Sisimpo. Sisimpo unfortunately has another engagement. So if you don't see her, please do not think she's rude, but there's just been something that needs her attention urgently. But she's always keen to chat or talk to the members of the BMF. If you want to talk to her, we'll avail her contacts for you. Sisimpo, whenever you're ready, I'm okay with you leaving the platform. Thank you so much again. And just to echo on what Mpo is saying is the conversations that happen here, then get translated into policy positions by the BMF. I know tomorrow morning, Deputy President Tasnim, welcome. I had welcomed you in your absentia. I know tomorrow morning we're having a workshop on the Code of Good Practice on elimination of violence and harassment in the workplace. And this is going to be a policy position that will then be taken by the BMF and given to Minister Tula Singesi under the Department of Labor. So these conversations that are happening in the BMF are not just conversations, they're conversations that we take and make them into policy position. So it is important that you join us, and it is important that you get your voice heard, because this is how the policies of the countries are made, and this is how the country is governed. So you want to also have your voice in how we shape the future of this country and how we write the political playbook of this country. So without, thank you, Sisimpo, again. So I'll go straight to the Minister. How are you today, Minister? Just a disclaimer, you can bring the little one in closer, they say, so she can definitely sit through this conversation next to you.
Thank you so much. I had already prepared an apology, because when she sees that I'm in virtual meetings, she makes it a point that she appears, looks at herself, and then she buzzes off and comes back again. So she thinks she's very pretty.
We totally do not mind. We know that a lot is at play, especially at this time. You're a career woman, you're a mother. So we have to provide spaces that are safe for you to also be a mother while you're having conversations with us. We don't think there's a work-life balance. So whenever you can bring your baby to a BMF event, please feel free. We'll also pass around the girl. So let's start our conversation. I like starting with formative years. So how we're going to do this conversation, it's just going to be it's going to be a conversation. It's not a Q&A. We're trying to get out as many jewels as we can from you, because we believe that you're a heavy hitter. We believe that you epitomize integrity in an institution that lacks integrity. I'm not going to say a political party, but the space of politics is known as a place of backstabbing. And for me, consistently, you're one of the women that come out tops when you say integrity, women in politics. Ayanda Tlotlo for me comes out as tops, as one of the women who have integrity within the political arena. So I'll start with your formative years, Minister. Leaving the country at the age of 18 for exile. What is going on in the political space of the country? What is going on your mind? What are your parents saying? Because when I was 18, I know I was highly dependent on my parents. So you saying you're going to Angola in exile. What's happening? If you can please take us through that.
Thank you very much, Iviwe. And for those who don't know me, my name is Ayanda Tlotlo, originally from Soweto, although I now live in the northern suburbs, if it's anything to go by. But I'm a Soweto girl at heart, so much of a Soweto girl at heart. I left South Africa at the age of 17. My younger sister was poisoned in detention at the age of 16 and subsequently died. My mother has been in and out of detention ever since I went into exile. solitary confinement, 6 months at a time and stuff like that. So I think in a sense, it runs in the family, because my brother, who was also younger than the two of us, younger than Linda and I, also joined me in exile. And going through military training was not the easiest of things. But you see, the fortunate thing with exile life is that we regarded one another more than brothers and sisters would regard one another. Because, and this is why sometimes when I look at the ANC today, it feels like an alien organization to me. Some of the things that are happening within a party that I love so much can be so hurtful, can be so shameful sometimes, to a point where you say to yourself, is this my ANC or is it a different ANC? Because the word comrade meant I would take a bullet for you. The word comrade meant he or she could take a bullet for me. And sadly, the political landscape today is quite different from what it was in the 80s when I was a member of Umkhonto weSizwe, and also quite different from the early 90s. But yeah, I left and joined Umkhonto weSizwe, having been given a choice as to whether I was going to go to school or I was going to go to join the military wing of the African National Congress. And my natural choice was joining the military wing of the African National Congress, because I had left my country with the sole purpose of getting an AK-47 as a 17-year-old little girl to come back to South Africa and fight for the liberation of my people. That's basically why I chose MK over and above going to school when others chose to go to school. Others were not as lucky as I was, because some looked much younger than their age. Some were actually much younger, and they were forced to go to school in a sense, because the leadership said, no, you can't go to the military. And I was fortunate enough that as a 17-year-old, I looked quite mature enough to go into the military. Not that if they had refused, it was going to be easy for me just to accept it, but that's the choice that I made. And throughout our training, we were treated in the same way that the male folk were treated. We did the same amount of kilometers in the tactics and the physical training class. We carried the same amount of kilograms when we were given the base plate to carry in an artillery lecture. We carried the same weight of the AK-47 and any other piece of artillery piece or arm that we had to carry. It was the same weight. It was not lighter for women. We did not carry the G. Peterson during our training. We all carried AK-47s. So it was tough, I must say. But all of the training was grounded on the politics that were instilled in us as young people of the time. So before you even carried that AK in your hand, you would look at it at a distance and see it on comrades who were trained before you, but you were never allowed to touch it, because the mantra was that the ANC develops a political soldier first before a military person. So you were taught politics that starts from the history of resistance in South Africa. And you would remember that the history of resistance was about land before apartheid was even there. So it was the land question. So we went through the history of our country, the wars of resistance, the political prisoners on Robben Island, the British colonial rule. We learned about socialism versus capitalism and the different economic systems of the world. We were young. We were able to absorb all of these things. Every morning we would get someone who would read the news to us, who would have been listening to the various radio stations, Deutsche Welle, BBC World, and all the radio stations of the world, compile a news compilation. And in the morning we would be falling in front of the admin block, That was in pre-training, but at training time, we would fall in at one of the fields in the bush, and someone would read the news. And without fail, we were all expected to make a contribution on the news items of that day. So our opinions, our views, our voices were heard, they were welcomed. And as such, we learned to be confident in dealing with world issues, in dealing with issues that affected us in South Africa. We had knowledge about almost everything that I could not have learned from a university. But that university was the greatest university for me.
Sure. It seems like, I think when we hear about things that happen in exile, we only hear about the AK-47. We don't get a full view of what was happening. And I like that it seemed like more than anything, what pushed people in exile is that there was a national agenda. So everyone was working towards the same goal. And I think it's something that is lacking in the country currently, but we'll come back to that later. So now I'm interested to know, Minister, what are some of the lessons from exile that you are still using today? That this is how maybe tactics when you're negotiating for things, or just the simple routine of things, how you do things. So I'm interested to know, what are some of the lessons learned in exile that you still apply today?
I'm not sure of the application. It's only the people who experience me and my temperament will be able to say she lives by that value system that was instilled in her when she was in exile. I mean, one of the first things that would happen, what would happen in the camps when President Oliver Tambo came to visit was that we'd have a cultural evening, and President Tambo loved choral music. So we used to have our cultural evenings from time to time, and we had various cultural groups. So we did not forget our culture. We did not forget the cultural songs, the cultural dances, and stuff like that, because we would practice that as we lived. And we had choirs, we had bands. I belonged to a band, and I was the lead singer in that band with some other male comrade, and others belonged to Iskananda, others belonged to various types of cultural formations. And we would perform all of that when President OR came, or any other leader came to visit the camp. And what President would always ask us was, who do we serve? Whom do you serve, comrades? And we would all in unison say, we serve the people of South Africa. Now that is what was instilled in us, service to the people. And I try to live that, that value system up until today. We were also taught humility. You would never place self above the collective. You would never place self above the people. We were taught during our tactics class that you move at the pace of the slowest soldier. And the lesson that you learned from that was that if you are a soldier and you are slow, you would make sure that you pull up your book, your socks, and you try and keep a pace so that you do not hold the platoon or the company back. So it taught us to strive for excellence, in a sense, that you could not be left behind by the platoon or hold the platoon back because you were actually the slowest soldier. But it also taught those who were the fastest soldiers to be patient with others, to bring them along. I mean, I remember a day where there was a comrade who couldn't cope with the amount of pressure, having ran so many kilometers with the ammunition and arms and all of that. And we had to tie our military belts around the platoon runs in a formation. So we had to pull him until such time that he was able to get the rhythm and we could all move together. But I think the other reason for that was because you had to pull up your socks and ensure that you keep up and you keep to the pace of the platoon so that the enemy does not catch up with you. So you would not hold the platoon back in case the enemy was advancing. So all of that, the mentality that was instilled in the tactics class was that of ensuring that you move with the rest. You do not go at a tangent on your own. The collective was more important than the individual. The collective was more important than self. Then we also have the march and drill classes, Ilen and Ibiza, who left, right. We had those classes, but I can tell you the march and drill classes, which most of us hated, were classes that were designed to help us to concentrate and focus. Because if the commander said left, turn, and you turned right when the rest of the platoon turned left, be rest assured that you are going to be punished. Sure. So march and drill taught us focus, it taught us rhythm, it taught us, it helped us to absorb the fact that we were little in the eyes of our commanders, and therefore we had to take instructions and orders. To a point where when our seniors gave instructions, you took that instruction and you complained later, you complied and complained later. That was what we were taught. We were also taught humility. Again, comes back to the issue of don't place self above others. We shared so much, amongst one another. When I say to you that the word comradeship meant I would take a bullet for you, I really mean it. We could take a bullet for the other. In our political classes, we were taught about international solidarity. That's why some of us still hold dear to our hearts the struggles of the people of Palestine. We hold dear to our hearts the struggles of the people of the Sahrawi Republic. So those struggles of the Cuban people who have been under economic blockade for many, many years, those struggles for us resonate with us. Because in our struggle as South Africa, many countries came to the table and they offered us solidarity. So that spirit of solidarity comes from that humility, that you are who you are because of others. And we really were who we were because of the Soviet Union who gave us arms, because of countries that sent us books in the camps, and this general support that we got, clothes and stuff that we got from other countries.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Minister.
When I'm long, please do tell me and stop me when I'm long-winded.
Okay, I will. Just to cue in some of the comments that are coming from our audience. This one is coming from Nosisa Penga, and she's saying the ANC that the minister is talking about is the one that I would have risked going on exile for. I'm not sure the current one is worth that risk. And then she puts a crying face. So it seems like people are very disheartened about the ANC, and we'll get to that shortly. Just before we get to that, Minister, I want to, post-1994, political formations are unbanned. And you then work for companies like Telkom, which is I think is a state-owned, there's a state-owned. You work for Sanlam, Portnet, and then you go straight into being a civil servant. Was it tempting for you to stay in to have an option of being in a private company like Sanlam and just doing and just being an executive in those companies, or for you, because you had training in exile, then for you it was a natural move to gravitate towards civil serving? So I'm just interested in you making that decision, civil servant or stay in corporate.
Well, the choice for me was very clear. I did not want, for starters, I did military training. When we came back home, I had no desire to enlist in the SANDF. As a result, I then demobbed and I joined your parastatals, and I worked there until I then left and worked for Sanlam. But prior to that, I've also worked for the Associated British Ports and also for the New York and New Jersey Port Authority. So corporate life for me was very interesting. And I must say, it is part of the reason where I am today, because of the training and what I had to experience in the corporate sector that has put me where I am today. Going into government was really branching off to a different sphere of management. And I became the head of department for safety and security in Gauteng. And I think I did pretty well if you look at the legislature records and the AG's records on how that department went from very little work to a lot of work that we tried to do, and with unqualified audit reports as well in between. Yeah, I enjoyed my time in the private sector. I enjoyed my time in parastatals, but I also enjoyed my time as the head of department. But also remember, around that time, I was also seconded to the Scorpions to start up I was the national deputy head of the Scorpions, and I was responsible for investigative support, which would have included a lot of things, including the corporate support services. So yeah, I did enjoy myself in the private sector, I must say.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, diving straight into the political playbook of this country, and I'm speaking from someone who's engaged with a lot of professionals, that it seems like the political space in South Africa is a very exclusive one, but it's said that it's not exclusive. I say this because whenever you have an opinion, it's say, go to the branches, go to an ANC branch and go have your opinion there. So when you get to a branch, perhaps there's no organization, it's just disorganized and very frustrating for professionals. So, and this then leads to voter apathy when we have to vote, and just normal citizens not being interested in the politics of this country. What do you have to say? What do you think that the ruling party is doing wrong? What do you think should happen in order to bring everyone into the politics and to the shaping of politics of this country?
I think we shouldn't be discouraged with or about what is going on in the branches or what is going on in the ANC. If I were to be discouraged, I would have left by now, gone to the United States and joined my husband and lived there. I wouldn't want to be discouraged. Does the situation as it is currently make me happy? The answer is no. Would I have loved to see the ANC better than what it is today? The answer is yes. But what am I going to do about that? I think these conversations really help a lot, because we're able to share ideas, because it's not just me talking to you, it's also me learning from you in these platforms, which is also helpful. And what I learned is what I take back to my branch or to the NEC or to cabinet for that matter in the discussions that we have. So these conversations also shape my views, and they also shape my input in the political sphere that I belong to, whether it is cabinet, the NEC, my branch, or even parliament for that matter. So the political landscape is much wider than what the ANC is. And I think we shouldn't leave the ANC to the vultures. We can't afford that. If the branches have disintegrated and people feel unwelcome, I think you have to make your presence felt. The ANC belongs to all South Africans. In fact, the ANC belongs to the continent. And this is what you will hear if you go into the continent. Our counterparts across the African continent will tell you that this ANC is also ours. Do not mess it up in the way that you're doing. So I think even for South Africans, whether you belong to the ANC or you do not, the ANC belongs to you as well. Because for the longest of time, this has been the only organization that to a very large extent carried the hopes and aspirations of the South African people as a whole. And I don't think it would be fair to future generations that this generation that is meeting today under the auspices of the BMF has given up on the ANC, which is something that they would have wanted to inherit. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to find ways of helping in the little or the best way that we can. And I don't think any effort in trying to resolve issues within the ANC or to help the ANC to really find its way and get back on its track is a futile exercise. So I think there's so much more that we can all do. When you talk to MK cadres, they speak like how you phrased your introduction of the subject. They say, oh no, the branches don't want us there. It's just difficult to go there. People are just not receptive. MK cadres talk like that. And I always say, comrades, if you are not going to force your way into these structures, who else is going to give the ANC the same type of branding or standing in the community like the BMF does today? So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to help. It's not good for South Africa for the ANC to die and disintegrate in our hands.
Just a comment from here from Dr. Princess Nelisi Msibi. She's saying we're being discouraged at branch level, ANC isafani. And another comment, just to also add or close the loop on what we just spoke about, Minister. How do we then, as South African, this is coming from Nosisa Penga again, how do we then, as South Africa, try to regain our patriotism, and how do we get back the economy into Black hands, into Black South African hands, if I may add?
Now you're asking me difficult questions. I was happy before.
So it's two. How do we regain patriotism? Number two, how do we take back the economy into Black hands?
I think patriotism is something that nobody can take away from you. Nothing can stop you from being patriotic. I don't care how your country is in terms of its standing in the community of nations. I mean, the poorest of poor countries across the world have that pride about their country. It doesn't matter what it looks like. And I think this is what we need to remember, that nobody can teach you patriotism. It's something that comes from inside you. It is you, it is who you are, it is your value system, it is the culture of your people, it is the resilience of your people, it is the warriors of yesteryear. It is Madinoche, it is Mantadise, it is Umkabai, it is Unandi. It is all of these warriors that brought us where we are today that tells you inside that you will be a patriot. Now coming to the...
coming into the economy one.
Yes, coming into the economy. I would like to see a country where, a time in this country where the inequality gap is much less than what we have. We are known to be the most unequal society. I don't think it's something that we can pride ourselves of as a country. And it starts from it starts from your past. Where we come from has bred and developed who we are. The education system needs to be a system that helps people to be entrepreneurial, a system that helps people to be innovative, a system that helps people and prepares them for the job market, prepares them for the intelligentsia, prepares them for whatever section of the economy that people would want to be a part of. So it really starts with the education system, both your lower education and also your tertiary education. But it's also on the individual that you need to do. We've seen people who are semi-literate, but have made a mark for themselves in the world. Umama Esther Masang with her painting. She has taken the culture of Amandebele that was unknown and put it right on the seats and on the body of the BMW. You have many women who are semi and also illiterate, but they're able to do these things that those of us who are literate are unable to do. So the issue of the economy really is about government creating the environment for the economy to open up. But also, and that's my personal view, placing, I don't have to say penalties, maybe there's a nicer word, but I'll use the word penalties. For those that do not want to open up the economy for the rest of us to participate in. It shouldn't be easy for people to close the economy to themselves and not let the rest of the population in, because in the long run, it has its own socio-political ramifications. That's when we will be seeing more hunger and desperation, and that hunger and desperation leads to all sorts of things, including civil unrest. So I think the gap between the rich and the poor, or the unequal society that we live in, is something that government, including big business, should be very cognizant of and work together to lessen that divide.
Thank you for that. So, Minister, you talk about then we are going to talk about policies that are going to then enable us to gain our economy back into our hands. And my fear is that this conversation is going to happen. And yet again, the conversation of women inclusion is going to fall through the cracks. So for me, I want to know, and also in the political space, how are you including women into the playbook of politics into this country? What are some of the things that you are advising that young women in this platform or wherever they're watching, how do we then come into the fold, entrench ourselves so that we are not left behind into the conversation, bearing in mind of the sidelines of being sidelined that continually happens. We know in politics it's very difficult for women to thrive because there's topics of harassment. In the workplace, it's very difficult to climb the corporate because there's someone who thinks that you can sleep with them so that you can ascend to the next level. How do we guard against that? How do we then come in and entrench ourselves into these spaces so that we are not left behind again?
President OR, who was the greatest advocate for the emancipation of women, always used to remind us that the struggle for the emancipation of women is not a struggle that has to be carried out by women only. It is a struggle that has to be carried out by men and women. And I think men need to understand that they cannot move and forge ahead in economic inclusion, because what you would have seen over years, even on Black economic empowerment, is that women were fine to be 30, 40 in a group that got a small stake, which would be 2% in a mining deal, when there was one man who would get 26% of that stake in that mining deal. So for years, we have seen this happening in South Africa. And you're correct. When we talk about economic inclusion, what does that actually mean for women? And what would be put in place to ensure that I'm not expected to come with 30 other women when a man is only expected to come alone with his jacket, or maybe just with his sons? Because that's what we've seen all along. Now, when we talk about the inclusion of women, the recognition of women, the appreciation of women, the positive reinforcement of women in the workplace and in society for that matter, what we have failed to do is to list all of that which we feel are gender injustices. We talk about gender-based violence, we talk about this, but for me, the broader phrase should be gender injustices. And we need to be able to clearly articulate what these gender injustices are. One of them is gender-based violence. Another one is sexual harassment in the workplace. And the list is endless. Socioeconomic exclusion is another one. And as long as we have not clearly articulated what these gender injustices are, which also lead to gender imbalances, we might not be able to clearly articulate what it is that we want, both for inclusion in legislation, but also in policies. We have from time to time women's caucuses in Parliament, and I'm sure it's also the same with the African Parliament. I'm not sure whether the BMF Women's Empowerment Desk has actually asked to make a presentation or a representation to the Women's Caucus in Parliament, or better still, to the various portfolio committees that deal with economic inclusion or economic development, or that deal with the economy in general. And I would want for us to use the parliamentary constituency offices, to use Parliament to advance all of these issues that we regard as gender imbalances, so that the lawmakers, which are your parliamentarians, can be able to articulate and insert some of these views into the lawmaking processes. So we have the state which comprises the judiciary, the legislative arm, and also the executive arm. We talk a lot with government, but we do not talk to Parliament, and neither do we engage the judiciary on some of these issues. And I think that's one of the ways that I would advise that we should look at advancing the issues around women's emancipation. But one of the issues that you had spoken about was the elimination of violence, harassment, and harassment in the workplace. And I've always said this in my circles, whether it is in the NEC or in cabinet, to say the greatest tragedies about this is that women end up succumbing to harassment so that they can be appointed in higher positions. Women end up not succumbing to harassment because they feel that it is not correct, they are being treated unfairly, and they don't get the promotion that they actually deserve. So there's a lot of issues that happen in the workplace. I mean, when the crime stats were released, quite a number of murders, attempted murders, assault, GBH, common assault, happened in government buildings. Now the question is, what led to that? And if you could look at all of that which happens in corporate buildings, you ask yourself, a rape that happens in a government building, how did all of this begin? Did it not start with sexual harassment, which quickly escalated into rape in a government building? And the possibility for that is yes. With the murders as well that happened in government buildings, it would be interesting to see the gender of the people that get killed or that got killed in government buildings. So the issue of sexual harassment and the broader issue of gender injustices, I think, is something that we need to take forward.
Sure. Thank you. Just also, I'll close the loop on that. I know that recently, as the BMF, we were invited into a parliamentary session where we spoke about the gender pay gap. So we consistently try to give our voice to these things and try to shape policies of this country. Now, we'll finish at 7, so just bear with me. There's just one last question, Minister. This is coming from Papama. And he's saying, corruption has come to dominate the way we interpret and what goes into our political economy space. It seems to also dominate how media and other publics portray SA to the globe. Is this deserved, or is it a sign of how we manage national image of South Africa? And who do we see as carriers fitting the image that ought to be associated with South Africa going forward? So what's being portrayed out there is a South Africa that is corrupt, and it's portrayed into the politics, and then the media also takes that and gives it to the political arena. To the global arena, and then we say who is best to represent South Africa, who is brand South Africa in inverted commas, who must carry our image.
I think all of us have the responsibility to be the brand ambassadors for our country. And all of us have a responsibility to articulate the work of government in the fight against corruption. It's all good and well for the media to portray, and this is the criticism I always have about the media, because it is a one-sided story that talks about the extent of corruption, that never articulates what gets done to fight the scourge of corruption in our country. And it's not as if corruption is a national identity, because that's what we're being reduced to. And that's how the world sees us, as a country that is riddled with corruption, and that this country is just a crime scene. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. Corruption is at a high level. The reporting of corruption, I can only give you the Steinhoff example and what has happened in other areas of corruption. Now, if you talk grand theft or a corruption heist, Steinhoff is your textbook story. It is your case study. If you're going to look at what has happened in government with regards to corruption, it could pale into significance if you were to apply truthfully your mind and your heart into what happens in the corporate sector. And I'm not excusing what goes on in government, because suddenly the face of corruption has got so much melanin. It has become so black that the media does not want to talk about corruption that has another color. So the identity of corruption in South Africa has been blackened. And I think as brand ambassadors, all of us being that, because you interact with the international community, you have a government that is serious about this. You have police who might be corrupting themselves, but they are caught by other police. It's not as if everything is bad. Things are bad, but it's not as if it's doom and gloom. So I think all of us have to be brand ambassadors. We went to Senegal with the Minister Begitsele yesterday. And if you read from the international media how Black people in South Africa have targeted white farmers, they're killing them left, right, and center. They're talking about genocide and all of that. But when you go to these farms, nobody talks about the murders of Black farm workers, or even, for that matter, the murder of Black farmers. You talk about stock theft, you talk about everything, you talk about crime in the rural areas. It includes your farming community. And when we went there yesterday, I said to Minister Cele, I will go there on condition that the meeting that we're going to have is a meeting of the farming community and not just the white farmers. And it truly was a meeting of the farming community, because I called people from AFASA, which Dr. Vuyo Mahlati, and may her soul rest in peace, was the president of. I called FUSA. We started calling left, right, and center to make sure that even the farm workers were part of the meeting. And at least we achieved that. But if you read the international media about what goes on in South Africa, you would really think that we have become a crazed nation, that where criminality is just rampant. And the way that it is being portrayed, I think we all have to, in the small platforms that we all have to put the record straight and not sugarcoat corruption. If it is there, talk about it, but also talk about the work that is underway that is designed to help us to eradicate criminality in our country.
Thank you so much. And we have run out of time. I wish we could continue forever. And the questions are pouring in. I'm sorry, guys. The minister has another engagement, so I have to let her go. But just before she goes, Minister, I think this is an opportunity to you that I'm giving to you. You can have a call for action. How would you like to be supported? How would you like more women to be active players into politics, into what you do, into your space. So this is a call for action. I'm giving you an opportunity to do that to our membership in closing.
The space that I work in is a very closed space. And one of our weaknesses, I might say, is in the area of economic intelligence. The analysts are there, but we need people, and I've said this to the DG, that I don't want your run-of-the-mill economists helping us to put up an economic intelligence strategy. I would like economists from all walks of life. Your crazy one, you're not so crazy one, your highly intellectual ones, those that are run-of-the-mill that are like Milton Keynes, and also those that are like John Pilger, or even what's the guy's name from France Piketty? Those that are unconventional in a sense. To also look at government's strategies around economic development, to look at the various, for instance, what I was saying to the president today, for instance, was that we are talking about an economic recovery plan. That does not talk about the cannabis economy, which is a huge economy that can help us to grow our economy. It's said to be 107 billion rand economy. That is hardly tapped. You would look at that economy has contributed about 3.9 to the GDP percent to the GDP of Canada. If we could look at all of those areas that are unconventional and bring them into the mainstream of our economy, it would help a great deal. And I'm sure all of you would have all sorts of ideas. I would not mind having another session, hopefully when we get to level 0, so that I can sit with you and, you know, shake hands and hug and all of that, and talk about what we need to see in economic strategies that will help our country go forward. It's part of my responsibility as Minister of Intelligence, but also look at border management strategies, because also border intelligence is part of our strategy as well.
Thank you so much, Minister. I will take you up on that when level 0 comes. We'll have a follow-up questions, a contact session with you. And just to close on your end is like, I think I go to bed well at night knowing that the security of this country is on your shoulders. It's on the shoulders of people like you, Minister Ayanda Tlotlo. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to your office, Nene, for facilitating this conversation for us. So in closing, I'll have our Deputy President, Ms. Tasneem Fredericks, to close for us. DP?
Thank you so much, Iviwe, and thank you to the Honorable Minister, Mayor Ayanda Tlotlo. Minister, you know, really, I think an hour was too short, but I understand your time is valuable and you have a finite amount of hours on this planet. So I just want to highlight you said service to the people. You know, you kept repeating that slogan, service to the people. And I think that if one looks at the political landscape and if one looks at corruption, and if you look at the gender inequality, we cannot ignore the intersection between being Black and being female in this country. In fact, globally, but more so in South Africa. So you speak of a time when you were serving in Umkhonto weSizwe and you carried the same rifles, the AK-47s. There was no distinction in terms of what you could do as a woman versus what you could do as a man. But at some point in our history, I think, you know, we lost that and we started to not give ourselves permission. We started to allow ourselves to be led by men. And I think, you know, this issue of inequality, this growing inequality, and how do we close the poverty gap? It's what the BMF stands for. We personally worked on the national minimum wage as a way of bringing decent wages to something that we understand historically our mothers and fathers were paid peanuts. You know, BMF speaks to growing a strong Black middle class who have strong ties of obligation to their poor families. So we certainly, you know, want to thank you. We want to thank the ANC government because there are many policies You spoke about the people of Palestine. We understand the ANC's view on the issue of the Palestinians and the solidarity that you give to those people. So, I mean, it's important, not that we are touting for a specific party, but to say that this is what you stand for in your personal capacity, but then you also have this other hat. So I think that, you know, with more comrades like yourself, with more ministers like yourself, within government, we definitely will see, and we need to ask ourselves why we don't have less corruption in the country. And I think the reason for that is because exactly what you say, your agenda as a woman is service to the people, you know? And if we had more women, I think we would have less corruption. That's my personal firm view, Minister. I'm sure that you will agree with me. I wish I could have been everywhere and been the one to ask the questions and been the one to interview you. And thank you for extending your availability, because then we can definitely have another session with you. We definitely will ask you to assist us into the corridors of Parliament so that you can guide us in terms of how we make more representation as women. Our president made an announcement on Women's Day to say that there would be 40% set aside for women-owned business. Now, we haven't seen that translated and where that comes from in terms of what legislation. So I think as a nation, we have the best policies, but I think on the implementation part, we lack a lot. And we drag our feet in a sense. So I want to end on that note, because I am mindful of time. And I want to thank you. I want to thank Iviwe for doing such a sterling show of a job. I wouldn't be surprised if she gets poached by the SABC soon. So you see, Minister, we grow organically leaders within the BMF. I'd like to thank our behind the scenes BMF admin staff who work, you know, beyond the 8 to 5 clock. I'd like to thank, in our absence, the chair of Gauteng, Mpo Maseki, also just for the initiative, and thank our participants this evening for joining us and for making time to be part of this broad, important conversation. So I wish everybody well, and I also can't wait for Level 0 Minister, when we can hug and hold each other's hands and we can really meet in person and take this conversation further. So thank you to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation, and please ensure that it happens. You know who to speak to, Iviwe. 2 hours would be fine, and yeah. Looking forward to.
I definitely will. Thank you so much, Minister. Tasneem, Deputy President, my Deputy President, thank you again for always holding our hands. I remember you did this from the time we're student chapters, and you still are holding our hands even today. We appreciate you so much for being an enabler and just supporting us in every initiative that we do in advancing the woman's name within the organization. We do not take that lightly. I will be in conversation with you again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Also talking all things women discrimination in the workplace. If you can join, please do join us. For those who are the friends of the BMF, please do not forget to join the BMF. We love you as friends. Would love you even more if you become paid up members, so that we have a stronger and a bigger organization where we can take the future of this country forward. We will be having another session when we're talking academia, and we'll be having it with Professor Pakeng. So be on the lookout for that invitation. It should come out very soon. I look forward to conversing with you again. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you.